Bringing it all together, the full transaction perspective. At this stage in the course, you are no longer learning individual concepts in isolation. You are now stepping into the mindset of a complete commercial real estate professional. Every chapter leading up to this point has built toward one objective: understanding how a transaction flows from start to finish. A commercial transaction is not a single event. It is a structured process that moves through defined stages, each requiring attention, compliance, and strategic decision-making. The ability to see the entire life cycle is what separates an average agent from a true professional. This section begins the final integration of everything you have learned. Stage 1. Establishing the agency relationship. Every transaction begins with agency. Before discussing property details, pricing, or strategy, the agent must clearly establish who they represent and how they represent them. Under AAC R428-1101, agents are required to act with honesty, integrity, and in the best interest of their client. The use of the Real Estate Agency Disclosure and Election (RED) form ensures that all parties understand the relationship from the beginning. For example, when working with a commercial buyer in Scottsdale looking for office space, the agent must clearly define whether they represent the buyer, the seller, or both under limited representation. This step sets the foundation for everything that follows. Stage 2. Identifying the opportunity. Once agency is established, the next stage involves identifying the right property or opportunity. This includes analyzing property type, location, zoning, income potential, and market conditions. For example, a client looking for an industrial warehouse in Mesa will have completely different needs than a client seeking a retail strip center in Gilbert. This stage ties back to Chapter 5, where property types and investment strategies were discussed. The agent's role is to align the property with the client's goals. Stage 3. Contract formation and negotiation. After identifying the opportunity, the transaction moves into contract formation. This is where the deal begins to take legal shape. Under ARS Paragraph 44-101, contracts involving real estate must be in writing to be enforceable. The commercial purchase contract outlines all essential terms, including price, contingencies, timelines, and obligations of each party. Negotiation is critical at this stage. For example, a buyer may request extended due diligence for a complex office building, while a seller may push for a shorter inspection period. This stage ties directly back to Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, where contract structure and negotiation strategies were developed. Stage 4. Due diligence and investigation. Once the contract is executed, the transaction enters due diligence. This is one of the most critical phases of the entire process. During due diligence, the buyer investigates all aspects of the property, including financial records and income, physical condition of the property, title and legal issues, environmental concerns. Arizona case law, including Hill v. Jones, reinforces the importance of disclosure of material facts. While that case involved residential property, the principle applies broadly. Material facts must be disclosed, and failure to do so can lead to legal liability. For example, if a seller fails to disclose known structural issues in a commercial building, it could result in litigation after closing. This stage is where risk is identified and managed. Stage 5. Financing and closing preparation. As due diligence progresses, financing becomes a central focus. The buyer must secure funding, whether through traditional lending, private financing, or cash investment. Each financing method comes with its own requirements and timelines. For example, a lender may require updated financial statements, appraisals, and tenant leases before approving a commercial loan. At the same time, escrow and title work are completed to ensure a clean transfer of ownership. This stage ties into Arizona requirements for proper documentation and compliance under ARS, paragraph 32-2151.01, which mandates record retention for real estate transactions. Everything must be documented, organized, and verified. Stage 6. Closing the transaction. Closing represents the final step in the transaction life cycle. This is where ownership is transferred, funds are dispersed, and all contractual obligations are fulfilled. However, closing is not just a formality, it is the result of every stage working correctly. For example, if financing is not properly secured or title issues are unresolved, closing can be delayed or fail entirely. A successful closing reflects strong contract drafting, effective negotiation, and thorough due diligence. Stage 7. Post-closing responsibilities and risk management. Even after closing, the agent's responsibilities may continue. Post-closing issues can include lease transitions, tenant communications, property management coordination, addressing unresolved contingencies. Additionally, agents must maintain proper records and documentation in compliance with Arizona law. This reinforces the idea that a transaction does not simply end at closing, it continues beyond it. Connecting the entire life cycle. When you step back and look at the entire process, you can see how each stage connects. Agency establishes the relationship. Property identification aligns with client goals. Contracts define the deal. Due diligence uncovers risk. Financing supports the transaction. Closing finalizes the process. Post-closing ensures continuity. Each stage builds on the previous one. If one stage fails, the entire transaction can be affected. The professional mindset. Thinking ahead at every stage. A high-level commercial agent is always thinking ahead. While negotiating a contract, they are already considering due diligence. While in due diligence, they are preparing for closing. This forward-thinking mindset reduces risk and improves outcomes for clients. For example, an experienced agent may include specific contingencies early in the contract to prevent problems later in the transaction. This is where true expertise is developed. Transitioning to advanced professional practice. This section marks the beginning of your transition from learning to mastery. You now understand the full life cycle of a commercial transaction and how each component fits together. In the remaining sections of this chapter, we will focus on compliance, ethical obligations, and advanced professional standards, ensuring that you not only understand the process, but can execute it at the highest level. Online discussion. Why is it important to understand the entire transaction lifecycle rather than just one stage? Answer: because each stage impacts the others, and missing details in one phase can create problems later in the transaction. What is the most critical phase for identifying risk in a transaction? Answer: due diligence, because it involves investigating all aspects of the property and uncovering potential issues. How does forward thinking improve transaction outcomes? Answer: it allows agents to anticipate problems early and structure the deal to prevent issues before they arise.